their responses, and when a bell rings, that means time has expired. We'll begin the debate by giving each candidate 1 minute for an opening statement, and they'll be given another minute at the end for a closing statement. Questions will be asked in a rotating order, but we're beginning alphabetical, so that means, Mayor Brady, you have 1 minute for an opening statement.
Okay. Well, first, thank you all for being here. Thank you for hosting us. It has been my honor to lead the city as your mayor for the past 3 years. I'm running for re-election because I think the record justifies it. Gainesville is in the middle of a renewal, and you see it all around you. And it's not exclusively because of the policies out of City Hall, but City Hall has played a critical role in making Gainesville a better place now than it was just a few short years ago. Our economic activity is back. You see enhancements to our parks and new parks being built. We've expanded our transportation network with more sidewalks and bike paths and transit routes. We are building a transportation system that works for everyone. We're attending to parts of town previously neglected, and we're supporting those who've been most vulnerable. And of course, we are finally getting our GRU bills under control. City Hall is more open now than it's ever been, more diverse, and new viewpoints are welcomed. We're moving in the right direction.
Mr. Poe.
The greatest challenge facing Gainesville today is equity. We have a growing income inequality gap, and we have, as a result, growing economic segregation in our city. We can fix this by doing 3 things. First, we need to provide better economic opportunity for all of our residents. This means a living wage, starting with what the city pays its employees and who we contract with. It means fostering better jobs for all skill sets and lowering utility bills for low to mid-income and users. We need to fight for a better transportation system, a system that works for all users, whether you're 8 or 88. And we need to work towards a plan for 0 deaths on our roads by the year 2025, and I have a way to get us there. And finally, we need to fully commit to the well-being of our children and our youth. We need to fully invest with our partners, the school board, the county, and all the private providers, and we have to make sure that our children have a place to go, a meaningful place to go between 3 and 6 p.m. every day. If we do these things, we can break the cycle of poverty in our community, and if you fight for me, I'll fight for you for the next 3 years.
Mr. Shepard.
My name is Donald Shepard, and I wish to take the chair of the mayorship to represent the people. We've had too many years go by without the people's words meaning something and being heard. Our city commission is not the commission that you deserve. I choose to take and make those changes to take and put the people's word back into our city and to take and, as your mayor, show you the infrastructure of Gainesville as far as jobs, as far as travel, as far as the commitment of our citizens and our students. I'll be the first mayor that is going to take and ask for to have student votes put back on the ballot in 2017. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, guys. We've already teed up one of the issues that we received a lot of questions about, inequality and wages. Mr. Poe, you already mentioned about your support of a living wage. Maybe you could explain that more since you've already said that. Maybe the other candidates could explain if they support what wage they support for city employees and what other ideas they have for narrowing the gap between rich and poor residents.
Sure, thanks, Nate. A living wage means a wage that people can earn and support themselves off of. And in Alachua County, that wage is benchmarked at just under $15 an hour for somebody working full-time. And so I think the city needs to show leadership. The city can show leadership in this by making sure we pay all of our employees, whether they're part-time, full-time, no loopholes, every employee $15 an hour. But not only that, everyone that we contract with pays their employees $15 an hour as well. This will have a significant buoying effect for our entire community. This will put more money in the pockets of our lowest income earners, which will then spend it at local businesses, helping those local businesses out. It's not just $15 an hour, though. For a single parent with one child, the living wage is $22.50 an hour. That means that when we're paying people a minimum wage of just over $8 an hour, that's 1/3 of what it takes to actually support a family with one child. And so we need to start moving in the direction of paying people a fair wage, a living wage, a wage that will give them dignity to support themselves, lessening the need for government subsidies and programs, and freeing them up to fully enjoy the opportunity that Gainesville offers to many of our residents, but not enough.
Mr. Shepard?
As your mayor, I agree, this living wage is a must. What we're going to take and do is to take and institute that, but you know, commissioners and mayors, they don't have the power, you have the power. So as I move forward, I ask you to take that power in hand and vote for someone who is behind you 100,000%. I'd rather go home and watch my TV if I don't have that. And I feel I have that, and I feel that that's what makes me so devoted in the last 5 years to take and be here for you. I ran as city commissioners. I've learned from Mr. Lauren Pohl and other mayors and candidates that were on the board of the commission, and that's where I got my political experience. I told Mr. Pohl I'd like to fill your shoes one day, and here I am. I feel I'm full in those shoes. So let me take this opportunity to not only fill those shoes, but show you what I learned in respect. So vote for me in 2015, and you'll see the power that my experience, that my godfather, James B. Wilmot, brought to Gainesville. Let's continue that and make Gainesville what he dreamed it could be.
Mayor Baratti?
Thank you. So, you know, my door's been open, and I meet with people regardless of whether or not I'm inclined to agree with them or not. And I met with many of the advocates for the living wage improvement. I said, you know, we'll get there. And I'm willing to work with them. What Mr. Poe has not said is if he wants to do it in year one or spread it out over several years, which many of the advocates for the living wage are willing to do. I know in previous forums you've indicated you do it right away. There are issues of budgeting. I mean, we have a lot of services we provide. And Mr. Poe has 6 years in elective office, so he certainly knows how those budgets are put together. And we just don't have millions of dollars sitting around. And then you have to look at who gets it right away. Everyone? You know, we hire 16-year-old kids to be lifeguards in the summer, $15 an hour. You know, so we have a record we can both point to. And whereas his rhetoric is thick on the living wage, his record is thin. 6 years, never once championed this initiative, never once introduced a program to do it, never once. Okay, I voted for the pay raises that we put in place. More importantly, when the city manager came forward with the plan to terminate 6 janitors that were receiving a very barely getting by wage, I led the effort to keep their jobs. So I've defended our employees at all levels. I've supported pay raises and increases, and I have a record to show that we'll get there, and I'm willing to continue working toward that goal.
Mr. Poe, you have 30 seconds to respond to, particularly when are we going to get there in terms of the living wage? Do we have the budget to do it, I guess, were the main questions that were brought up.
Well, as any budget, it's about prioritization, and I think that we as a city and we as a commission need to say, are we willing to pay our employees less than a wage that allows them to live and survive with dignity? And I think that we get there as soon as we can. It is difficult to take recurring expenses all at once, but I have not said whether we would do that in year one or whether we'd phase that in over 3 years. That's something that we negotiate with the rest of the commission, and what I would say is we need to get there as quickly as possible.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll move on to the next question, and I mentioned that they'll be going in a rotating order, so with who we ask, so this one we'll start with Mr. Shepard. Some of the questions submitted to us involved city development, and one person wanted to know, is Gainesville going to become an unaffordable place to live like South Florida after its growth explosion, and how are you going to protect Gainesville's natural beauty if so?
How this is going to take place is we need to develop a fund for our historical department. We need to stop robbing our trees in Gainesville, keeping our trees here. We need to start purchasing property so that we can keep our trees. We need to take and work with the university to take and address issues that the university has. Let's stop being cozier with that. That's what's going to make our future. The other thing I'd like to end with is that my plan is a plan that the people told me they wanted. And if the people are saying that they want not a big booming town, then we're not going to have a big booming town. And how I can say this is right here in tonight's agenda shows all the money. If you look at the PDF of this tonight's agenda, it'll spell out how much money we do have. Let's stop hiding how much money we have, and let's start using it for our people. Let's start using it to pay our contractors what they deserve. This is something that's been robbed from our citizens, and we need to take and work on that. Thank you.
Are you allowed to repeat the question?
I can. And you're actually up next, Mr. Brady. One person wanted to know, is Gainesville going to become an unaffordable place to live after its growth explosion? Similar, they compared it to South Florida. And if it does, what will you do to protect Gainesville's natural beauty?
Yeah. So I'll tackle the second part of that first, which is we have our ordinances, rules on the books. We're doing a very good job of protecting our natural environment. Strong tree ordinance. We're creating more spaces for the public to gather, beautifying lots of this town. Now on the front end, when I ran 3 years ago, I made affordability a centerpiece of my campaign and was subsequently told I had no vision, because evidently being for affordability is not part of the vision thing. But we have to be a city that's affordable for its people to live in. And it's not just the cost of development, it's the cost of your utility bill. You've got to have affordable rates. We, unfortunately, are under this GRU, or this GREC biomass contract that has driven our rates among the highest in the state. I've led the way to first stop the bleeding and then secondly start to bring those rates down. We've offered our first rate cut of any kind, the fuel adjustment rate, just recently. As it pertains to development, the research and the evidence, we're here on a university campus, we appreciate research, is clear. The heavier the development code, the more costly the price of doing business is. So I've led efforts again to make our land development code more streamlined, more citizen friendly, less on super high density, less on extravagant projects like a $128 million streetcar that Mr. Poe supported.
All right, then it's lucky Mr. Poe's up next, so you can respond.
Sure. Well, let me respond by answering the question. And I think the question was about affordability of housing and also whether that degrades the natural beauty of our city. So first of all, the more housing stock we have and the higher density that housing stock is, that has a lowering effect on rentals, because the greater the supply of housing, the more competitive the market is and the lower that housing price becomes. But we need to do it smartly. We need to grow smartly. We need to grow in a well-planned manner to avoid the sprawl and the sort of strip mall scenario that has dominated South Florida because of poor planning efforts. We also need to discuss an inclusionary zoning policy that makes sure when new development is approved that there is affordable housing required to be built with that new development. And finally, we do need to protect the natural beauty of Gainesville. This is one of the great reasons that we all choose to live here. And that means creating great public spaces that come through careful planning and, you threw me off with your time there. They come through careful planning and a significant amount of community input that allows the decision makers to know what the community desires and then how to implement that in a very deliberate and careful fashion. If we do all of those things, we're not only going to have a great affordable housing stock, but we're also going to have a beautiful city that we all are proud to call home.
Okay. Mayor Brady, you've brought up utility rates a few times today.
Did Don go?
He began.
Oh, Don
that
began
question.
the question? Okay. Got
Threw
it.
me off for a second there. I was uncertain.
Sorry about that.
No problem. You've mentioned utility rates a couple times, and it's a question that we've also received from several of our respondents. We also received people asking about renewable energy. So I want to know, what's the bigger priority? What's most important? Keeping rates as low as possible, encouraging the use of renewable energy, and how are you going to achieve that goal?
So, one, you should seek a balance where we are able to do both, and we are doing both. We have one of the strongest renewable energy portfolios in the entire state, one of the best ones in the country. The problem is we're at overcapacity, and this is a clear difference where Mr. Poe and I obviously depart because, one, we both support renewable energy. I've supported it when it's come up, but I also believe it needs to be done in a way that can yield affordable rates for our customers. We've had to cap things like the solar feed-in tariff, which Mr. Poe's on record saying he'd like to bring back and continue to expand, even though, again, we are over capacity and we're paying over $200 per megawatt hour for solar, whereas under conventional fuels we can pay for around $40 per megawatt hour. The biomass plant, when you put it all together, is over $120 per megawatt hour. So if you simply have it all leaning on the renewable side, then you do completely dismiss any opportunity for affordability. There's got to be balance, and I've helped try to bring that. Like I said, we're finally offering our first rate reduction. Mr. Poe, back in October, said he's, quote, he thinks it's unrealistic for anybody to say that they're going to lower rates. We're demonstrating it can be done while maintaining an emphasis on renewable energy.
So if you were to pick a priority, what of those two is your priority?
Affordability.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Poe?
Sure. So, obviously, every person that sat on the commission wants to have as low rates as possible because we are sensitive to the burden that places on our customers. But we also need to be looking towards the future, and the future is coming very quickly with the Clean Power Rule. We are going to be required to have a certain amount of renewable energy in our portfolio, and through the careful planning of Gainesville Regional Utilities, we're one of the only utilities in the state that is going to be ready to absorb that burden. And in fact, GREC will be the only power plant in the state that will meet the standards of the new Clean Power Rule. But the truth of the matter here is that in the budget that the commission passed this past year, which was championed by Ed, it effectively raised rates on 75% of Gainesville users. It did away with our conservation rate tier structure, and if you crunch the numbers, the lowest 75% of users now pay more for electricity than they would have under the old rate structure. So that is my plan to lower rates immediately. We can go back and rework that two-tier structure where there's a broad base break in the rate that you pay and a much lower usage level that the tier changes at, and that will effectively lower rates for our lowest users, including most of our low-income users that live within the city of Gainesville. So we can do both, but I think it's very important that we make sure we keep an eye on renewables, because if we don't, we're going to be hit very hard when the Clean Power Rule comes into play.
So to be clear, renewables is what you'd prioritize for those two?
I think that we have prioritized renewables, and I think right now we need to turn to making those affordable.
So which one did you pick?
Well, if you're saying right now as we move forward, then it's affordability.
Okay. Mr. Shepard?
It's affordability. My answer is affordability, and we can afford it. We do have the money in our general fund and in our city to afford what we need to get done. I can prove that within the paperwork I have here, and I can prove that, I have proved that through other forums and through other city commission meetings. As your mayor, I'm gonna take and use what's right in front of us, and that's the best thing you can use. When you get up in the morning, the best thing you can use is the Lord's work. There's three things I run for: the Lord, my wife, and the people. Those are the things that get me in this chair. Those are the things I use to go forward. Affordability is really not a question now, because we got housing, we got businesses coming. What businesses? We got a plastic plant that I'm gonna introduce in 2017. We got a milling, where you do lathing and, 3DM, companies, we have them in our city. We have biomass in Alachua County out there. Keith Wilmot, my godfather's family.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry.
Mayor Brady, you were mentioned, so if you'd like to respond.
Sure. So it's interesting. Lauren Poe said that I adopted a budget that got rid of this rate, which is raised rates on everyone. What he didn't tell you is that it was his recommendation. Showing bipartisan leadership, I appointed Lauren Poe to chair the committee on utility rates. This was his recommendation. And then secondly, it's a misstatement because he's saying utility accounts. How many of you live with more than one person in your household? Okay, he's attributing accounts, not total number of people. We're not raising rates on 75% of the people.
Well, I guess that you were mentioned again, Lauren. Let's give one more response to specifically respond to. Did you make that recommendation? And then we'll be moving on.
I was chair of a committee that gave several recommendations back to the city commission with several options. The one that I championed was much different than the one that was adopted. It had a split at 750 instead of 850 kilowatt hours, and it had a much broader split in the rate that one would be charged. There was a 4-cent differential instead of a 2-cent differential, encouraging a conservation rate structure be maintained.
And it eliminated the 250 tier.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Please don't interrupt each other as well. We'll move on now. Transportation was an issue raised by a number of people, and I know the three of you have championed this as an issue as well. So the question is, what should be a bigger priority for the city? Making automotive transportation convenient and accessible, or encouraging the use of alternative means of transportation, and why? Mr. Poe, we begin with you.
Sure. So the first priority we need to have is safety, and you create a safe transportation network by making sure that all users are able to use that network equally and effectively. So I have a plan to reduce deaths down to 0 by the year 2025. That means people in automobiles, people on scooters, people on bicycles, and people walking. If we attack this and make that our priority, then what you're going to find is that our roads are safe, efficient, and effective for all modes of users. When we make our roads only safe and convenient for people in cars, that reduces the safety, the effectiveness, and the efficiency of the system for everybody else. I also believe that we need to greatly expand our transit network, especially in underserved areas. In East Gainesville, there's some areas that are isolated in Northwest Gainesville. If we want people to really have transportation choice, we have to make that a viable option for them. So absolutely, I would prioritize all users over one specific use, but I would also say that safety should be our major priority, not convenience.
So would you prioritize automotive transportation and making that convenient, or would you prioritize other means of transportation?
I think I answered that. I think I would prioritize other means of transportation because in doing that, you would make the roads safer for everybody. If you make them convenient for cars only, then you are making them more dangerous for everybody.
Thank you. Mr. Shepard, we move on to you.
Means for transportation are doing good. I will say that. We don't need to close our eyes on what we can do, and what we can do is fix our roads. That's a must. Before we look into alternative transportation, our roads got to be fixed. That question needs to be answered first. How do you come up with a way to fix our road? Where's the funding coming from? And what needs to happen as far as alternative transportation? Yes, Mr. Pohl brought an alternative transportation to Gainesville. A trolley car was an excellent idea, but other commissioners didn't think of it. Why didn't they think of it? Because they didn't think that Butler Plaza was going to be put in. They didn't think that all these housing complexes were going to be put in back then. But now they're there. So yes, Mr. Pohl's alternative mode for transportation was a great idea. And we would have had it here, this trolley car. We would have had it here to take and help transport our elderly, help transport our travelers that come into Gainesville. This is what I, as your mayor, will help to take and bring to Gainesville so that our lives are better. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Poe, I know your name was mentioned, but it wasn't really a challenge, so we move on to Mr. Brady.
Yeah, and what Mr. Shepard didn't tell you is that the trolley car idea had a price tag of $128 million, and we spent over $100,000 studying it. And when I became mayor, I tried to just cancel the study, and Mr. Poe voted against canceling the study for the $128 million trolley car, which the study finally came back and said it's not appropriate for Gainesville. We don't have the densities, and we're not going to have the densities for 30 years to support it. It's just a bad idea. And so, and of course, $120 million for a trolley car, $400 million for bus rapid transit, but yet we want to pay everyone a living wage. And we're also, I'm sure, going to get a question about how we fully fund our Parks and Recs plan. So money matters, and how you allocate it matters a lot. To answer your question, first of all, it's an old guard question that's either or. You're either for cars or you're for something else. So I'll answer the question. I'll be for something else, all right? I'll be for the alternative means, but I've done innovative things that weren't thought of before. One of the things we did was addressing the senior transportation problem, and I led the effort, and we have the first of its kind, the only one in the nation, partnership with Uber to provide low-income seniors transportation through Uber door to door. It's not being done anywhere else. It wasn't solved by spending millions of dollars on a mass transit scheme. It was a $15,000 seed money from the city of Gainesville. Okay, that's what innovation looks like, and it's transportation for everyone.
Thank you.
Okay.
Since,
I believe I was invoked there.
so was I.
I just mentioned the price.
I think
I think we're going to move on to the next question.
we'll move on to the next question. So how important is personal integrity and personal character to being an elected official? How would you describe your own experience in city government in terms of personal integrity and character? That's what one person wanted to know. Donald, you want to answer that question first?
Sir, me? Mm-hmm. Personal integrity, that's me. Integrity is manners. Integrity is respect. And that's one thing I hold above my life experiences, my own life. I am a gentleman. I have integrity and respect. You may not believe that because of the hoopla that was in the paper about me supposedly stealing somebody's truck. Well, that did not happen. I did not steal that lady's truck. I took care of that lady for years. Where was the family? Nowhere's around. So integrity is number one with me. Respect is number one with me. And the people's votes are number one. Thank you.
Mayor Brady?
Sure. Personal integrity matters, and I believe I am a person of personal integrity, that I treat everyone honestly. I treat everyone fairly. I have demonstrated that my door's open at City Hall. I don't have any preconceived notions of what your politics are or what your viewpoint is. I've actually been criticized for being a Tea Party agenda. Well, you know what? I built a coalition that has everybody was a part of it, from the right to the left, rich or poor, and that's because you get that way by treating people with respect and being honest with people and candid. We've made City Hall more transparent. We've held charter officers accountable and found that some charter positions needed to be vacated and new people put in. And it has to do with some of the decisions made that affected the quality of life in this community and has affected, the bottom line for the city, made ourselves financially vulnerable. So I take it all very seriously, and I'm proud of the efforts I've led as mayor.
Mr. Poe?
Well, integrity and character are important in any aspect of your life, not just if one is an elected official or a public official. The true measure of a person's character is how they behave when they think nobody else is looking. And that's important in every facet of our lives, how we conduct our personal relationships, how we conduct our professional relationships. And that's even more true when you're holding the public trust. So I was raised to believe by my parents that character and integrity were first and foremost what one should base their decisions on. You put service before self, and that's why I've been a public servant for my entire professional life. That bar, as we've seen over the years, it probably goes back to Plato and the polis in Greece, that we hold our public officials to a higher standard. When we run for office, we acknowledge that. We make a metaphorical signature on the dotted line that says that we will hold ourselves to a higher standard, and then it's up to the public and the folks that elect us into office to hold us accountable for that. So yes, absolutely, I do think it's important, and I have conducted myself in a manner I think fitting for that expectation.
Okay, thank you. And we're going to go into a bit of an introductory question that each of you will get a minute to respond, because each of your personal trials and tribulations was kind of brought up in this last question. So you'll get a minute to respond. How do each of you, and we'll start with Mr. Shepard, how do each of you feel about your personal lives becoming part of the public record and the public interest if you're elected as mayor?
I find it welcoming because I have nothing to hide. My wife, I've been married to for 23 years. I love her with all my heart. My personal record, I don't believe I have anything that I can stand before you and say I'm ashamed of. I'm proud of myself. I'm proud of what I'm accomplishing, and I'm going to be proud of what I do accomplish, because those vineyards are the vineyards which were enriching our new baby boomers and enriching your lives. Thank you.
Okay, and I want to, first of all, defend Don Shepard, and he is a great person, and I'm a big admirer of how he's lived his life. Now, about me, I've been in the news on some issues that I think you're getting at, and all I can say is, I believe I've responded in a way to be accountable, to take responsibility, to acknowledge that in my personal life I've made a few bad decisions, and to also then try to focus on my public life. And it's up to each individual voter. Some voters are a one strike and you're out, and I get it. But most voters, I think, want to look at the whole record. And the decisions I've made as mayor have absolutely made this city a better place to live. They haven't cost the taxpayers a single dime. They haven't cost the ratepayers the hundreds of millions of dollars it's costing us for bad decision making regarding our utility. So what I can do is just say, look, I've stepped forward, I've been accountable, and I will continue to be so, and I continue to lead the city.
Well, my advice to anybody that is seeking public office and has problems with their private life being exposed for everyone to see is don't do it, because it's going to happen. It harkens me back to a statement that Charles Barkley made many years ago when he proclaimed that I am not a role model. And unfortunately, the media said, well, yes, sir, you are. By choosing this professional career and choosing this life, that comes with the job, whether you want it to or not. So, this is a decision that needs to be made in consort with your family. And I did. I talked with my wife. My 4.5-year-old daughter doesn't quite understand the implications of such a thing yet, and my 1-year-old daughter laughs at me all the time anyway, so I haven't quite won her support. But we had that serious conversation, and my wife and I know that we do not really have a private life anymore. It's very difficult to have what most people consider a private life, and we've accepted that.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so moving on, a city ordinance that punishes bars caught with too many underage drinkers has not been enforced since 2014 due to various challenges in the city. So should the city just ban underage people under 21 years old, from being in bars past a certain time, or should we take other steps to curb underage drinking? Mr. Brady, we start with you.
The short answer is no, I don't think we should have an outright prohibition. I think we should just require that all bars, or actually all clubs that serve alcohol, should be required to get a special use permit that, one, ensures that staff is adequately trained, two, that they have acceptable technologies to identify fake IDs, 3, that they have a potential to hire an off-duty officer to be outside the establishment. That alone has a huge deterrent effect. And then I also believe that students, college students who get a first strike against them, it shouldn't be a permanent record. That we should work with them through an educational process, and so that they can wipe their slate clean. You mentioned 2014 and why we haven't acted on it, and I'd like to actually address that because I think it does show the kind of leadership I bring. We absolutely know that this was an ordinance that simply would not impact bars and business establishments. It would impact students. And last time it was brought up is in the summer when most students were gone. And I felt that all stakeholders should be at the table. I've shown that consistently on issue after issue after issue. So I put that into our general policy committee until the summer or until the fall when they got back. I called a meeting with the student government. We've discussed it. It is coming up in a future meeting.
Thank you. Mr. Poe?
So this is a very serious issue, and it's a serious issue in all college towns. And I was part of the original group that helped craft that ordinance. It got challenged, and one small part of that ordinance was found to not be in compliance. And so it was sent back to the drawing board, and there it went to languish. And that's been quite some time since it's been suspended, and no further action's been taken. It's a problem, and the thing is, it's not a problem for most establishments that serve alcohol. It's a problem for very few. If you look at the statistics, it's a very, very small number of bars that have the overwhelming responsibility for serving underage people. And it's there in the citations, and it's there in the arrests. We need to strengthen that ordinance to make sure these irresponsible business owners that are putting young people's lives in jeopardy, that are putting young people's lives in jeopardy of being sexually assaulted or being taken advantage of, we need to hold them accountable and responsible, because most of the bar owners out there are doing a fantastic job. They take their job as a business owner very seriously of protecting the safety of their clients. And so let's get an ordinance that has some teeth in it, that really holds these irresponsible bar owners accountable for the decisions that they make, and allow us to protect these young people that make our communities so vibrant and such a great place to live, work, and play.
Mr. Shepherd?
I'd like the question repeated, please.
A city ordinance that punishes bars caught with too many underage drinkers has not been enforced since 2014 due to challenges. Should the city ban people under 21 years old from being in bars past a certain time of night, or take other steps to curb underage drinking?
My belief in this is that you're taught by your parents, and you're taught by others. I agree with what Mr. Bradley said, that this is something that needs an ordinance to it. Mr. Pohl was correct in what he had stated, making them accountable, a time limit on it. It mentioned also about forgiveness. When we pray, we ask the Lord for forgiveness. So who are we? Hold it against them. So I also, as mayor, will take an ask to have records expunged, deleted, erased, that are on people that are out there looking for jobs. I will also ask that these young kids that are out there, they want to just find out what it's about. So should they be stonewalled? Should they be held accountable for their misactions? My grandmother told me, alcohol is a devil's orange juice. And believe me, as an old-fashioned guy that I am, I believe that wholeheartedly. Thank you.
Thank you. We heard a lot of different perspectives on homelessness, as I'm sure all of you have. We heard from some people who just said, what are we going to do to make sure that homeless aren't bothering downtown business owners? We heard other people saying, what are we going to do to ensure mental health services are provided to the homeless? So what's your biggest goal in terms of homelessness, and how would you make Grace Marketplace and Dignity Village better places? Mr. Poe, I think you're first up.
Sure. First of all, I want to congratulate Grace Marketplace for their first year and a half now of service to our community. They started out putting a sign on their door that had the services that they provided. It included bathrooms, showers, and storage. A year later, they had a 6-page booklet of all the different services they provided to the people in need, and that is making our community a much better place. The thing is, they don't have the resources to help all the people that they need to and that they'd like to. And so, Nate, you mentioned mental health. This is a very difficult vector in which to address homelessness issues. These are the hardest people to reach. A lot of times, a person with a badge is the wrong person to approach them to try to hook them up with services. And so I believe that we need to have a new wing of our police department that is completely focused on community services. These could be non-sworn officers that are experts in mental health, in other community issues that flare up from time to time, and they can very specifically go and help those folks, because we all know what has happened. Our prisons have become the de facto mental health treatment facility in this state, and that does nobody any good, not the taxpayer, not the other inmates in there when those people should not be commingling, and it certainly doesn't help the person that is sick that needs to get the proper treatment.
Mr. Shepard?
Homelessness, they say, is a choice. Certain people say that. Homelessness is something that I can sit here before you and say that Mayor Bradley did something about. He took these people that were homeless from the Bo Diddley Plaza and gave them someplace to go. Gave them a first step towards their future. A place called the Dignity Village and Grace Marketplace and Empowerment Center. These three names were chosen by boards, and these were guidance of the mayor. So, you know, some people will say he hadn't did anything for our people. Right there, you can testify that he did. Another thing that needs to be done is that they talked about putting in these little houses. Well, how are you going to take and get any money back from that once you put those little houses out there? Everybody knows they're not going to take and keep them up to par. So what we're going to do, what I would like to do, is put a facility out there that is a long building and have sectioned off and have showers, have kitchen, and that. Right now, all that money we've put there has been wasted, and that is because they're not listening to their commissioners.
So let me offer some clarity to what Don's saying is, if you go back to 2013 when I became mayor, there was no homeless center. There was not the Empowerment Center. There was not the Grace Marketplace. Why? Because we were in a lawsuit. We were being sued, and the city wanted to show that it could bully a private citizen around, so we were fighting back a lawsuit. And I did break that deadlock on a 4-3 vote. Mr. Poe voted to continue the lawsuit. Folks, we know how lawsuits go. Had we not broken that deadlock, there still would be no homeless center. So we're taking care of the homeless now because I decided to find ways to find consensus and to get something done. Or let's speculate like this. What if it had been built? It would have been built right next to this office park that had 18 small businesses. Can you imagine how many of those businesses would still be around if the Dignity Village was surrounding the businesses? You know, so a guy was fighting to protect his businesses, and Mr. Poe wanted to continue the lawsuit. I broke it. We now have the Empowerment Center. We have Dignity Village. The biggest challenge going forward is to make sure it's financially sustainable. It's not a matter of just writing a check for greater resources like Mr. Poe says. It's about tying the funding to performance. And I do not support GPD expanding to provide the mental health services, but I have initiated and I have led with this effort that we should contract with specialists, people who know what they're doing as mental health specialists to provide services to the homeless.
Thank you. Mr. Poe, you have 30 seconds to respond.
Well, the city got raked over the coals by settling that lawsuit early. We were compensated far under the value of what we had into that point, and that's why I fought. I was protecting the taxpayer dollars and what we'd invested in that process up to that point. At no point did I ever want us to delay the process of siting a homeless center, and in fact, the opportunity to site the center out of grace only came after that episode happened. And so I have tried to get a site since I've been on the commission.
Thank you.
I'm glad we finally did it.
Okay, Gainesville faces what's called a brain drain caused by two separate factors. Firstly, talented UF graduates leaving the city, and secondly, the challenges of making Gainesville an attractive place for people and businesses to relocate. How would you ensure Gainesville is a place where graduates want to stay, as well as a place where entrepreneurs and others want to move? Mr. Shepard, we start with you.
How would I do that? By helping our contractors hire these young people. By allowing our businesses to educate them. By bringing a place called Harm Museum here. By bringing businesses here that promote education. This is what I have in heart and in mind of bringing in your behalf. As our baby boomers come out of college, as she had said, what do they have to look forward to? We've seen in the paper tonight, if you read the paper tonight, or the Alligator, you've seen the question saying, what does our students have to look forward to? What is the outlook for our students once they graduate? Sorry to say that if I don't get in office, it is going to be like an unspun wheel. And if I get into office, it's going to be a wheel that can continue turning. Why? Because money starts one place and keeps adding and adding. That's why James P. Wilmot became a billionaire. And that's why he founded Gainesville in 1953 and 1927. He started East Gainesville. That's my goal, to bring back to Gainesville. Thank you.
Mr. Brady.
Yes. So the best way to deal with the brain drain is to create an environment where people want to stay. One of the most persistent, frustrating questions I've heard is, gosh, I love this town. I came here to go to school, and there's nothing for me to do. So we've worked on that. The first thing I did as mayor is we started a small business task force, because a lot of the young entrepreneurial class, they're not going to start as a mega corporation, they're start as a small business. And our city processes were very challenging. If you weren't university connected or could hire a land use lawyer, it was very difficult to get things done. And the people who had raised these concerns were often met with indifference by the city commission. That changed under my watch. We got 27 recommendations out of that committee and have implemented them. But that wasn't enough, because I realized it was also attitudes and not just policy. And so we created the Blue Ribbon Committee on Economic Competitiveness to make the city of Gainesville the most citizen-centric city in the country. And it involves completely rethinking how we do business, and we're starting to do that now. That's what leadership's about. That's what innovation's about. We're learning to grow it from the ground up. But I've also led delegations to other cities. I've been to the Silicon Valley, met with Uber, make sure that they could come into the city, because that's the kind of innovation we need. Been to Chicago. So I've met with corporate executives and talked about Gainesville as a future business home for them.
Mr. Poe?
Thank you. So we have rapidly changing demographics here in Gainesville and all across the country. And very soon, half of our workforce are going to be millennials. And they have much different expectations, needs, desires for what kind of city they live in. And I think about a good friend of mine, Amir Rubin. He's the CEO of a local startup business called Paracosm. And I've talked to him somewhat frequently about how are we doing, what's Gainesville need to do to attract more businesses like you, because ultimately 95% of all new jobs are created by startups. And so we need to foster that startup culture here in Gainesville, because that's where the job growth and the job base is. And he says, we need to create a city that that my generation wants to live, work, and play in. We need to have a city where folks can live in their apartment, can walk out, they can walk or ride their bike to work, they walk or ride their bike after work to entertainment, and then go home. And that is a element that we are missing in Gainesville. We're working, I think, towards developing that more, but that's what the future holds for Gainesville, and we need to diligently listen to that future generation on what their needs and desires are, and then create that ecosystem of creativity and collaboration that will make Gainesville be, quite frankly, a world-class leader in economic development.
Thank you. So we hear a lot about biomass. I hear from the mayor's supporters that Commissioner Poe made one of the votes to approve the contract that has caused a lot of problems. I hear from Mr. Poe's supporters that Mayor Brady made the vote to start those negotiations, so he is also culpable. So I want each of you in particular to respond to, first of all, explain, defend your vote, and say, was it a mistake? Mayor Brady.
So there's first of all,
we're running out of time. 1 second, so let's go 1 minute for these questions.
1 minute? Come on. All right, so we both cast votes. So in 2008, when I was on the commission, I did vote to move us in the direction of the biomass plant. But it was not the contract. And what I've said consistently is not what the fuel type is. The issue is the contract. And so Mr. Poe voted to ratify the contract. I never did. And what is the difference? Well, Navigant came in. They're an outside firm. They came and looked, and they said the difference between the motion I passed, which had clear parameters, had a termination for convenience clause, a shorter duration, different construction cost adjuster, different variables. The difference between the parameters that I put on the biomass deal we were going to look at and what he voted to ratify was $1 billion. $1 billion. Okay? That's huge. So we both support renewable energy. I've always been in favor of making sure it could still be affordable.
So do you regret that vote at all?
I don't regret moving toward renewable energies. I do regret that it's been misinterpreted and spun by people who are against me. How's that?
Thank you. Mr. Poe.
Sure. I've learned a lot in the period between then and now. And another thing that was pointed out in that Navigant report that really stood out to me is that they said it was unimaginable that there was not a draft power purchase agreement included and given to our staff in which to negotiate, or through which to negotiate that contract. Being new on the commission, I wish I knew more than I did at the time. I wish I knew to stop the process and demand that a draft purchase power agreement be included in the negotiation process so there were tighter parameters from which to negotiate that. And that certainly is valuable wisdom in any future contracts that I might negotiate. But ultimately, we will not know whether that was the best decision ever made or a mistake until 30 years out, and we look at the full effects of climate change, of the Clean Power Rule, of the pricing structure, of the other types of energy sources till we can answer that question.
Do you regret the vote?
I don't regret the vote. I regret not including more parameters in the vote, and I think I learned from that mistake for sure.
Donald, you didn't take a vote, but you can still respond to what you think about the biomass contract votes.
I didn't take a vote.
Right, you weren't on the commission, but you can still respond to the question of what you thought about the votes in the biomass contract.
Biomass was a farce. It was an infrastructure that was bought, was a mistake from get-go. Gentleman, as Lauren Paul is, and a professor that he is, acknowledging and wordsmithing as he is, to take and pass such a bill, to me, as a citizen, was disrespectful. To me, and to the voters, it cost us way, way too much money that was unneeded. If they took and used common sense in reading the form and the contracts, then it would never have happened. what needs to be happen is we need to buy it back and make that money count for us.
Thank you, Don.
Thank you, and I know we told you we'd have a minute for closing statements, but we're super short on time, so we're each going to give you 30 seconds.
You're kidding.
Mr. Brady, go.
If you've ever uttered the phrase, "I cannot stand the partisan bickering in Washington, D.C. or Tallahassee," then I offer you my truly nonpartisan leadership in Gainesville, which is a clear departure from the way it was when Lauren Poe represented the majority opinion in City Hall. Under my leadership, all viewpoints are welcome and all stakeholders are at the table. And the results speak loudly. You can see it all around you. Gainesville is moving in the right direction, and we've got more work to do, but we are closer now than we've ever been.
Mr. Poe.
Equity is the biggest challenge that Gainesville faces today. If you vote for me, you will vote for somebody who will work to narrow the income inequality gap, work to eliminate the economic segregation that plagues Gainesville, and I am proud to be a progressive candidate for Gainesville's mayor. I believe that I represent the values that represent Gainesville citizens, and through this leadership, you will see a complete rebirth of Gainesville, and we will move to realizing the opportunity, the full measure of opportunity that every citizen in our city deserves.
Mr. Shepherd.
As I become your mayor, if you vote me in, I already took and said before God and before the people that I would do everything in my power that to take and make Gainesville the place you want to stay and live in. And all this information here will disappear. When you vote for me, this will disappear. Why? Because I don't have no back records that take and close your opinions off. So vote for me, and let's vote for a better future. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this WUFT News special Gainesville Mayoral Candidate Forum, and thank you to our candidates for participating. The event was produced in collaboration with the Gainesville Sun, the League of Women Voters in Alachua County, the Bob Graham Center for Public Service, and the Graham Center Fellows. We'd like to thank the Martin H. Levin Advocacy Center at the University of Florida Levin College of Law for hosting the event. The program was produced by Ryan Vasquez and Matt Sheehan of WUFT News, Terry Moo of Soundville Multimedia, and Richard Drake and Brad Noblet from the College of Journalism and Communications Division of Multimedia Properties. Once again, thank you for listening. I'm Marie Ettinger. This is Nathan Krabs. Stay tuned for the PBS NewsHour coming up on WUFT FM at 7 o'clock.
All right.